We have a heck of a show for you tonight. Um, I first met our guest probably about 3 years ago, maybe 2 to 3 years ago. He was wearing a shirt at the time, but that wasn't always true in subsequent times when he joined our groups. We never quite knew where he was joining from, but we always looked forward to seeing him, and we knew that there was more to this gent than just the icon that we were seeing. And sure enough, when we looked behind, we found that along the way he had two Olympic gold medals. Um, he and a few silvers and bronze as well. He'd summited some very, very high mountains. I've always wanted to say this on Solo Art's Heel because it sounds like it belongs. He was an abstract impressionist and had 80 solo exhibitions. And so it all started coming together. And then we had to work on it for about a year to do this show. And here I am delighted to introduce Mr. Greg Burns. Hello. Unmute, Mr. Burns. There you go. Is that all true? What I said? Oh, I don't know what he's working on there, but I will say that's a Greg Burns masterpiece behind him. Unmute, because I can't hear you till you unmute.
How about
There
now?
you go.
Okay,
There you go.
good.
There you go.
I'm not sure where to be looking. Where's the camera I'm supposed to be looking
I
at?
don't know, but look in the camera. It doesn't matter. We'll excuse you. But all I want to know is it all true? Is it all true? Because the other thing I have to say is I listened to that playlist. I don't know if you put it together or someone else, but when they started playing Ocean Man, it reminded me of that story you telling me about working in the galley for some yacht. Well, did you pick that Ocean Man?
That all those okay, first of all the stories you've said are true. And the ocean, the galley was sailing from Tahiti to China on a boat called the Return of Marco Polo while making television documentaries called The Return of Marco Polo. So yes, that's all true.
Okay, so I may just have to return to Marco Polo, but if you haven't already figured, this man is a world traveler, and he was probably a world traveler out of the cradle. How many countries did you live in by the time you were 16?
By the time I was 16, about six. So let's see, born in America, went to Jerusalem when I was a year old, contracted polio, came back to America, moved to Paris when I was five, Germany when I was 11, back to America, then Holland when I was 13, then back to America for college. And yeah, there you go. That's the first 20 years.
Now, I have to say, you're giving away secrets here because I was going to introduce the audience to this gently, but I'm still going to stay in my line here. I'm not going to get out of my lane, which you know about when you swim and when you run, you got to stay in the lane. So I'm staying in my lane. Which was growing up, which was your favorite country?
I really enjoyed Holland because I moved to Holland when I was 14 and I was going to bars and drinking beer, which is a big deal. I know it's not anymore, but and I really enjoyed the Dutch, their pragmaticness, and you could in Holland since you could drink beer and do a lot of other things, you were given responsibility to take care of yourself, and I really enjoyed the freedom to make mistakes and then to figure out how to fix things. And anyway, I really enjoyed the Dutch people and living there, and it was a great formative time. And I had a motorcycle with training wheels, and it was a really great
So,
time.
was it just the beer? Because Holland was known for other things at that
Yeah,
time.
tulips, but
Oh,
yeah.
course, I was thinking cheese, to be
Oh
honest.
yeah, yeah.
I was thinking cheese. How stupid of me. Okay. Um, yes, there are a lot of my school friends who used to take a trip over to Holland quite regularly. So, um, and how many countries have you visited by
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, probably like 80. Yeah, I've spent the last 40 years basically backpacking, what I do called expeditions and exhibitions around the world, just traveling, oftentimes backpacking, well, sometimes backpack class, sometimes business class, it kind of depends, and just traveling and painting wherever I go. And come like a squirrel with nuts, taking them back to home and burying them somewhere in the backyard. So
Yeah.
I've got a lot of paintings from all over the world.
And then you dig up one of those nuts and it inspires you for a painting. Is that right?
Yeah, well, actually, honestly, doing stuff on location, sometimes you can't get any better than that because you're feeling the place, the environment, you hear the people, you hear the sounds, you hear the ocean, you're in the mountains. It depends, but absorbing and channeling, if you will, that environment through yourself into the art. Um, Sometimes it's not. I don't want to say it's unrepeatable, but that'd be a second version of already, the original, so to speak. So
And for those of you who are new to solo arts here, I should have said this at the beginning. We sit down. We've done 37 or 38 of these videos now, and we sit down with people who have used the arts to help them heal. And as you will hear as we get into this, that Greg is well qualified for that. Um, ANCAN conducts virtual support groups, and Greg came into one of our virtual support groups, and that's how we met, and that's how we found he was international. So, staying on that international theme, Greg's not going to paint. We've had that. We've had people come in, and we've had them paint as they talk. And Hannah Garrison, our own Hannah Garrison, did that. But we're going to show you some videos that have been curated especially for this show and talking about the global aspect of Mr. Burns. We're going to start with, why don't you tell us what we're going to start with and we'll go into it.
yeah, it's a little video called "Painting Around the World." It just shows painting on location in some different places, in nature, in a hotel, in a residency. So different examples of painting around the world to some good music. So fire away.
supposed to live without it, but let's talk about it. Wouldn't it be nice? You're a Northern California boy, and you pick Southern California music. How did that come about?
I've been in both. I'm also in I'm a Southern California boy. I went to UC Santa Barbara, so that's pretty south.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Now, if you are watching carefully, you'll see where we're going with this next segment. Because you probably noticed that Greg had an arm crutch on one side. I don't know if crutch is the politically correct word anymore, or what you're supposed to call it, or forgive me if
I
I
couldn't
use.
tell you.
Yeah,
I
right.
call it a crutch. Yeah, yeah.
As long as I didn't offend you. So that was on in his left arm whilst he was painting. And if you look further down, there were some leg irons. So why don't you just give us a quick history of of where that equipment comes from?
Yeah, that comes from a guy named Brian Neep, an orthopedic surgeon guy. Now, I got polio when I was a year old, which paralyzed me from kind of the waist down, and as a result, I wear long leg braces and use forearm crutches to move around. So I've been doing that my whole life, and traveling around the world, on crutches and braces, and I've done some marathons, and I've done some Ironman, and I've swam in the Paralympics, and I've done a lot. Of course, I didn't swim with crutches and braces, mind you, but that would really slow me down. But that's kind of defined my life in many ways. But it's also colored my palette, and it's been it's kind of been an amazing run, if you will, an amazing journey. Because having a disability that I would say opens and closes doors for you. And I tend to try to prefer to remember the open doors than the closed doors. I mean, such as things like, if you go to Disneyland without crutches and braces, you have to wait in the queue, and I don't. And I remember my mother figured this out long ago when we were in Paris. I was 6 or 7, and we went to the Louvre. And the Louvre, there was a line of people around the Louvre, like getting in to see the Rolling Stones. And the guy at the front, he saw me on crutches, and instead of waiting in the line for 2.5 hours, we got to just jump the queue and go straight into the Louvre. And I'll never forget, after that, I remember after we went to the Louvre, my mother took me out for an ice cream sundae. So I learned how to leverage my disability. But anyway, I digress.
Well, not really, because there was a dead giveaway there that you spent some formative years in the UK.
Europe, yeah. Some in the UK, yeah. And more.
And what was the dead giveaway, Mr. Burns? How did you give that away to me right now?
You'll have to
I'll
tell me.
tell you,
You tell me.
because you said queue and not line.
Ah, the queue, not the line. Well, that could be from my Singapore time too. Yes.
Oh, that could be from your
Yeah.
Singapore. That could be from your Singapore times. So, how was it? How was it growing up, um, disabled in the way that you were disabled from so small and going through school and seeing the other kids around you? And how did you integrate with those kids?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's a longer. I don't know if I can do it justice, but I think I was very lucky in many ways. My mother was very proactive, and she threw me into the deep end, if you will. My mother always said the best thing that ever happened to Gregory was my sister Roberta, who I love dearly to this day. But she came after me, so I had an older brother, Chip, myself, then Roberta, and then Scott, and so. The reason she said that was because when Roberta came along, my mother couldn't baby me anymore, and so she had to fend for 3 kids and then eventually 4 kids. So kind of let me get on with my life really, and if I wanted to go to the 7-Eleven, I was gonna, she wasn't gonna drive me. I would try to walk there or something. So anyway, so I had good parents, good parenting. And when I went to schools, I went to international schools a lot of the time, and that's already a smorgasbord of different peoples and
Yeah.
ideas and stuff. So, and I think at the same time, I was kind of tough or cool. I had sunglasses and I wore a Levi's jacket and I wanted to wear Beetle boots, and I just wanted to be cool. And I don't think took I didn't take any prisoners, and I didn't take no for an answer. And if I won't use any expletives, but I didn't take any what from anybody. And I think people just they weren't afraid of me. But I did I did have two crutches, which if you did get on my wrong side, I mean those are good weapons. So anyway, not that I ever used them in self-defense, but so I think as a kid, eh, I was really adaptable, like I think all kids are, and I just learned how to integrate and make friends, and you know, just do what I wanted to do. Um, maybe the hard, girlfriends. That's another story. That, but that's another
Go
story.
ahead.
You're
Go
gonna
on. Go
bring
on.
it up someday. But anyway, let's leave it at there for now.
Okay, we're just going to leave it that. I was looking forward to hearing about Gophers. Um, but the reason you moved around so much was because your dad was in the diplomatic corps, correct?
Yeah, he was in the State Department. Funny, I mean, when my parents got married, my both of my parents worked in the department, and my mother was a secretary, and my dad was an attaché, like an attaché case, I guess. But
Mhm.
anyway, he was called an attaché, and my mother's rank was higher than my dad's, so he didn't start with some silver spoon. He started at the bottom and really worked his way up. And so, yeah, that's our first, as I mentioned earlier, our first position posting was in Jerusalem, and then Paris, and then Germany, and then Holland, and then New Zealand. And so
Mhm.
it was, yeah, I was bitten by the travel bug at an early age, as were all my siblings, and we saw a lot of the world, and I got to understand, or tried to understand and learn how other people live, and what makes the world go round, really, and try to understand and appreciate other people and their different ways of their points of view, that wow, they don't think like I think. They and that's okay. And so yeah, that was a good training, a good learning.
Now, before we get to the next video, which I'll have you introduce, we need to, and the next video will explain why I'm asking this question. Um, when did you figure out that you were an athlete? You had terrific athletic ability.
I was always active, and I'd play football in the backyard with my friends, but I wasn't going to be running around the end. So I was the quarterback. You hike the ball to me, and then I'd throw it. And when it was time to play baseball, I was a good batter with one arm, but I wasn't going to run to first base. So I just figured out, but it was never fair, really, because I was always competing against people that weren't disabled. And that really was kind of, I was kind of bummed about that, but I still, took part. But then when I moved to California after my freshman year in college, I moved to California, which is where I am right now in the Bay Area. And I went to this small college called De Anza College, and they had this sports for people with disabilities program, which at the age of 17 or 18 was the first time I'd ever heard of that. And like, wow, that's cool. You mean I can compete against people like similar to me, and that seems a lot fairer than competing against Rick. I might be smarter than Rick, but he can run faster than I can. But anyway, I digress again. But
Hey, don't be so sure.
but the point I'm trying to make. So I learned about sports for people with disabilities, and then it was like, oh, if you compete and you kind of are fast enough, you can travel. So I thought, wow. And I heard about this swim meet in Rio de Janeiro, and it was the next year. And I was like, you mean if I swim fast enough and make the American team, I can go to Rio? Yeah. sign me up. Where do I, how fast do I have to swim? And, at the age of 18, you can imagine all the testosterone that, you have at 18 and, that, dun, 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 the song and the bikinis and stuff. So anyway, it was really quite exciting so then I started to compete and I competed all over America. And then I went to Rio. I made the team, went to Brazil, and then I went to Canada, and then went to the UK, went to Stoke Mandeville, which is where the Paralympics started
Yeah,
a long
yeah.
time ago. And then I kind of retired. And we'll talk later about the Paralympics because then I had a second career after I went off to Asia. But I think you want to see.
Yeah, we'll come up. We don't get too far ahead of yourself.
Yeah,
Now
let's
look,
not do
we're
that.
ready for another video, and I
Okay.
wanted people to know how athletic you are before they saw this next video. Would you like to explain to them why?
Well, yeah, I did. I competed for decades, really. I had a 27-year swimming career. But what you're going to see is a video about trekking in Ladakh, and it's a great little story. I met a fellow who you're about to meet named Paul Fairhurst, and he'd been riding his bike in Singapore where we were both living at the time, and I didn't know him, but he was riding his bike. He hit a pothole. He crashed. He broke his neck and he almost became a quadriplegic. But when I met him, he'd spent the last several years trying to get back to zero. He had crashed. You'll see, he was in really bad shape, and he worked really hard. And I was really impressed with how much effort and discipline he had to get to the point where he could walk again. And when I met him, it's like, okay, you've been working so hard just to get back to zero. We should do something fun. So we concocted this idea to go on a trek. And at first, I wanted to go hike around Mount Kailash in Tibet, and then we were going to go to Nepal and Burma, and then we ended up going to Ladakh. And that's enough. Why don't we'll run the video, and then
Well,
we can talk more about it.
except I have one question before Quinn runs the video. I have one quick question,
Quick
which
question.
is, which is, you probably have completed a marathon at
Oh
some
yeah.
point. Oh yeah.
Oh, that's the
Now,
story.
now,
Oh yeah, yeah, okay.
now,
Yeah.
yes. Now,
Okay.
because I was thinking whether, we were talking about running. Now, did you complete that marathon? Or were you a wheelchair athlete?
No, no. So when I was 24, I was living down the street here, literally in Santa Cruz, California, and I
Yeah,
I, I got this. I saw this It was a comic book or a magazine, and it said, run the Honolulu Marathon. This is 1984, and
yeah.
run the Honolulu Marathon. And I thought, well, I'm not doing anything next month. Why don't I try to do that? So anyway, long story short, I applied and I got my number, and they sent me my number, and I said, okay. So I flew to Hawaii, and I slept in the park in Ala Moana Park. And then the morning the gun went off at 6 o'clock in the morning. Then I was on my crutches, and I started running or hopping this marathon at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then by 8 o'clock in the morning, the people from Africa were finishing, and by 10 o'clock, people like Rick were finishing, and by 12, the rest of the people were finished. By 2, everybody was done, and they put the finish line down, and I was somewhere near Diamond Head. I was still running, and I didn't know that this was all going on. But I had this lovely day. It was sunny, it was beautiful, and I saw this swimming pool, and I went for a swim, and then I came out and kept walking, and people kept stopping me along the way and saying, what are you doing? I said, well, can't you see I got this number here? I'm running the marathon. Then they'd say, you look kind of hungry, can I get you something to eat? And I'd say, yeah, that sounds good. So they would drive home and get a bologna sandwich and bring it back and give it to me. People gave me 7 Ups, and this happened all day long. And then finally, like 9 o'clock at night, I kind of ended up finishing the marathon. It took me 16 hours, and I came in dead last, but I finished it. And that was a 42 kilometer.
Well,
Yeah.
I was thinking that you might have done it in a wheelchair, in which case you would have beaten me, but I would have been finishing around the 9 o'clock,
All
9
right.
a.m. mark and not the 10 a.m. mark. Just want to
Oh,
say, uh, Quinn, roll that video.
I'm Gregory Burns. 56 years ago, I was paralyzed by polio from the waist down. I'm Paul Fairhurst. I'm a C567 incomplete quadriplegic. I went out cycling one morning. I flew over the handlebars and I landed on my head here. At the date of the injury, I had a less than 10% chance of ever walking again.
I recall our first meeting was at a party. You walked in and I noticed that you had a little bit of a limp, and I thought, this guy and I kind of in the same camp. So I felt emboldened to ask you what happened, and you shared with me what had happened. And then as soon as you said, Johnny Walker, my mind said, keep walking. Then I said, wow, we should keep walking together. Truth be told, when I met Paul, I kind of sensed that it'd be good to put a little fire under your you-know-what. We've come full circle a year later. We're going off to
The DAC. I don't think anything prepares you for this. I think this is just something else.
I think this is the hardest thing Paul has done since his accident. He's never climbed the mountains he has on this. And I have a tremendous respect for the discipline, the training, the mindset that he's had to get himself to the starting line of this trail. Paul and I walk a similar track, a similar journey, and I've never had anybody so close to share with. And it's been like two logs on a fire, bouncing off each other ideas and philosophies and thoughts and feelings that have exposed some of the insight that we've gathered through our lives.
After 3 years of extraordinary hard work, I walked 35 kilometers at high altitude in very difficult terrain sometimes. On this trek, I've come to understand this thing has made me stronger than I ever imagined that I could be. I'm very, very grateful for that.
That's 3 years.
I knew the finish line was coming. I hadn't actually stopped to think about how I would feel when I got there.
being together, sharing that moment, and both of us soul searching, both of us on our own journeys.
I will find a way to live life with exceptional experiences that in whatever way either inspire people or give them hope. I knew that before we came, but I know it even more now. To me, mentorship means mutual inspiration and support. Making each other just reconsider the way that you approach your life.
To me, mentorship is about imparting wisdom gained through experience. The mentor owns it and shares that experience with someone so that possibly they can own that wisdom or that understanding. I don't think I'll ever forget this experience.
Oh, whoa. Oh my gosh. And actually, there's a question from Olga, but I can't answer it yet because we haven't talked about some of your paintings, which we're going to get to in a minute. And once we've asked that, I will come back to Olga's questions because it's a great one. But that was just inspirational, unbelievable. You mentioned to me along the way when we were talking about these videos that you combined some of your artistic talents into that trek. And I also know that you are involved with Art of the Olympians. So I guess what I'd like to ask you is, when did you figure out you were an artist as well? How old were you?
You know, I figured out that I was athletic when I was 5 or 6. I started swimming when I was 5 or 6. and I
Yeah.
started painting about the same time. So
Oh, wow.
I'm not saying I'm still figuring myself out for sure. I'm,
Yep.
an old man now, but I'm still figuring myself out. But I was always an athlete and I was always an artist, but it was like, how seriously do you take either one of those? And as I described the athletic part, when I found the Paralympics, then I got serious about the Paralympics. And I would say it was when I was in college that I got serious about painting and drawing, because I took a figure drawing class and they had naked women and that we had to draw. And that was like, okay, I think I should take this seriously now. So it really was drawing
The
the
naked
figure,
women or the drawing?
both.
Oh,
but
okay.
but in seriousness, I was freshman in college, and I started to realize that, oh, I like, this is something I might be good at, because like when I was a kid, I was doing all these like little things like draw Winky, and it was little, these contests, and I did the school mascot, and I did, like, on my book reports, like I'd have a 20-page book report, like 18 pages of artwork and like 2 pages of writing. And so, it was just my art was just evolving. And by the time I got to college, and then I started doing, I went to UC Santa Barbara, and I started doing etchings, and I started exhibiting on the beach in Santa Barbara, and then slowly just started to build myself up as an artist and figure out, what I wanted to paint. And that always changes. And when I started traveling through Asia, backpacking through China, Tibet, Nepal, India, and Pakistan, did that. I started to focus on sacred sites, paintings of temples and pagodas and different religious sacred sites. And so the painting has always been there. And that trek, actually, that you just saw, like, that was a 5 days trekking. And every night after we got to our camp, I had these 4 by 4 foot paintings that I was painting along the way. Like, they were strapped to the back of a mule during the day. And then at night we'd unstrap them and I'd put them against a tree or a rock or a building, and then just paint, and then let them dry overnight, and then pick them, wrap them up the next morning and take them to the next place. So I had this series that I painted I called my Hero's Journey series, which talks about this hero's journey about, starting at home, and then you depart, and then you get a challenge, and then you return. And so anyway, these themes in my life, I've had different themes throughout my life. And but the art, when did I figure it out? It was, I was a young person when I realized I could draw and paint and liked drawing and painting. But then it was later that it became more serious. But I didn't become a full-time professional artist until I turned 40. And then by then I had already exhibited in like 10 countries. But it was I don't want to say it was a hobby, but I always say, don't quit your day job, because being an artist is not, it's not an easy thing to make a living at, and you may not want to make a living at it. So I have made a living at it. But it's not an easy lift to do that, unless, you get discovered by, somebody named Getty or something. Anyway, it's not for everyone.
So I'm going to take this, before we get into the next video, I'm going to take this to what the essence of our series, our Solo Arts Heal series is, which is all about how you, our guest, use your art to help you heal and to help others heal. When did you figure out that art was healing for you? And when did you figure out that you could take your art and help others heal with it?
Yeah, I mean, long ago, I hate to admit this, but I kind of used my art as a counselor, or as a psychiatrist, or a friend, or whatever you want to say. But I was, when you find yourself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be, or go paint. And so I would sketch or draw or paint. And sometimes there was some pretty, I don't want to say violent, but there was some times when I was painting, like, my painting is very, I do big paintings and I use my entire body, and it's always been very, very athletic. My painting has always been very athletic, and That's why I study Chinese art, which is, you paint with your whole arm. You don't just, it's not just with your wrist. It's like your whole body. And so it's always been a very physical, tactile thing for me. But it's also, after a good day painting, like after a good run or a good swim, you can feel this cathartic effect of, okay, I haven't figured out the world's problems or all my problems, but I feel better. And so there's kind of this release. And so painting has always been a good friend like that. And I've taken it everywhere, sketching, a backpack with a sketchbook or paintings or whatever. So that's always been with me. So, but then about like 20 years ago now, we started to do workshops. My wife Angie and I, who we have a company that I do motivational speaking, and then we also do these workshops, which are, we take art and we use art kind of as a vehicle or a venue, a safe venue for people to get together and work together, whether it's to communicate or to express ideas or whatever. So we figured this out like 20 years ago and have been doing it ever since. These workshops that, we do schools, we do children, we do disabled groups, we do intellectually challenged groups, we do corporate executives. And what you're about to see is a video we did with Ukrainian refugees in Berlin, and also we did them in Prague. So in the beginning of in the first, let's say, year of, unfortunately, the Ukraine war, which is ground on much longer than we ever imagined. In the very beginning, everybody wanted to do something, and we were like, what could we do? So the American embassy sent Angie and I to first to Berlin, and where you're going to see this video, and then to Prague to work with. These were high school young Ukrainian refugees who had left Ukraine and were in Berlin and now in a German school, trying to navigate being an 18-year-old Ukrainian in Germany. And so we did these workshops for them, and that's what you're about to see here.
If you could describe your art in 3 words, what would those 3 words be?
Bold, inspired, optimistic.
Great.
As with all these classes with young people, I look at them and I realize that I wish I could think outside of the box like they do. They don't have all the baggage that we older people have, and they just go at things and they develop it, and it's lovely to see that, and it's encouraging to me to realize, hopefully they can teach an old dog new tricks. So I learn from them, I hope, as much as they learn from me. Oh, this is an art class, and they've learned how to use acrylic paints. Most of these young folks have never used acrylic paints before, so they've had a crash course in kind of contemporary painting and collage. So they're using acrylics, they're using magazines and tearing stuff out and drawing things in. So it's a real mixed media. No, I think art has a huge unspoken and silent benefit to people who do it. It calms us down, it brings us more peace, it brings us more a feeling of optimism, I think. And I think that when we focus on art, or we focus on our breathing, or whether it's arts or music or dance, some kind of creative outlet, I think everybody deserves respect and equality and being considered as equals. So I think people with disabilities, like everybody, have a lot more under the surface. And when we allow that to come out, when we encourage that or we invite that out, we can learn a lot from people with otherwise disabled or people who have faced challenges in their lives.
Can't help but agree. I mean, one of the things that I relate to with this is that I spent several years in Central Europe, and that was such a shock for me. And when these kids come out of Ukraine, it's not just that they've left their country. They've moved into a completely different world. Yeah. Completely different world. I mean, and just as the living in Romania was a completely different world for me, Um, and living in Ukraine in Ukraine wouldn't have been that much different. For them, it's a completely different world. What did you learn from those kids, Greg?
Well, I think I mentioned in the video, is just trying to think differently and stop just doing the same thing. Again, they were, as you've just mentioned, they were, adapting, and they were coming into a totally different environment. And, unfortunately, they were forced into that. And, as we get older, we don't often sometimes we need to get forced into things. And I would say, one of the easiest ways to get forced into something that you don't want is medical issues. And, we've all had our shares of, fair share of medical issues. And I'd say that's, none of us get out of here alive, and also none of us get out of here without suffering from medical issues. And I think that's been, for me, especially in the not recently, has been you trying to navigate some real challenges that have been scary and overwhelming, and trying to try to stay calm, stay focused, swim, paint, whatever it is, to try to keep our stuff together.
So when did you figure that? Well, I'm going to ask you actually the question, and then I'm going to come back to my question. But the question that is, because it's appropriate, that Olga has given us, is, and I want to go back to where here it is, because she phrased it very tersely and well. Where do you look for inspiration, and do you ever experience artist block? How do you get in the right mood to paint?
Yeah. Where do you get inspiration? I mean, I get it from a lot of places, but the most general is from nature, but also music, watching the human body, whether it's Simone Biles or some of the skiers we just saw in the Olympics and the Paralympics. I mean, I can get inspired by people as well. So nature, people, music, birds, dolphins. But yes, I get artist block like all of us do. And how do you go? How do you kick yourself out of that? I mean, I don't know.
Attend a prostate cancer group.
That will kick you out of some of your funk for sure. And also realizing that you don't, your life may seem like it's the pits, but actually when you hear some other people's lives or have bigger pits than yours do, you realize that, you're not so bad off. So you quit complaining. So, but again, the second half of Olga's question was,
the second half of Olga's question, I think, was about. I've got to go back to it now. It was, how do you get in the right mood for painting?
I don't think you really get in the mood to paint. I mean, I guess you can, you can have foreplay with your partner and get in the mood with candles and music and stuff like that. But when it comes to art, I mean, for me, you don't always have the luxury of getting in the mood. It's almost something that you just have to show up. And there's an artist named Chuck Close who's actually a quadriplegic painter now. He wasn't all the time, but he became a quadriplegic. Chuck Close, C-L-O-S-E. Anyway, he used to say, inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up. And there's something to be said for that. I think a lot of people think that artists just paint when they feel like it. And I think there is that wonderful sign of art, which is, I feel inspired and I paint, and that's great. But I think part of also being an artist, as being an athlete, a musician, a writer, a bricklayer, whatever you are, there's just a lot of times you just got to do, you may not want to do, but you just show up. And I think then you prime the pump, and then you put something in, and something happens, and you do something, and then there's a little conversation. Like you put red, and then your body says, "Oh, maybe you need some blue," and then you put some blue, and that's too blue. It should put some white, and no, white is too dark. We should need some black. Anyway, so I think that's we create our own momentum, or we can sometimes, and I think that's part of, again, as an artist, musician, ditch digger, you've got to sometimes just begin, take that first step, and the second one is sometimes easier. That whole, build some momentum and then see where it goes. And that's sometimes you just got to do that, even if you're doing a PhD thesis, young lady.
So let me move to segue us into the next video, which is somewhere between the last one and this one, which is you now make some of your living being a motivational speaker and communing with Komodo dragons as you're doing it. Isn't that correct?
Well, that's on the boats. Yeah. So I speak, I've been doing motivational speaking since 1992, since the Barcelona Paralympics. And then because I won some gold medals and set some world records, people think, well, you could probably motivate my team. So I was invited to do motivational speaking all over the world with different groups. But more recently, I've also do it on cruise ships. So we go to, as Rick mentions, the Komodo Islands or wherever. So but yeah, the other thing we do is these workshops I mentioned, and the video you're about to see is a workshop I did with a company called Equinix here in the Bay Area, and it was an amazing experience because they had a huge conference for their, what I would arguably say, their type A, their high achievers. This was the 1,000 guys and girls who had hit their numbers and went off to Dallas for 3 days to have a big conference. And these people were, well respected, smart, top of their game. And then, 1.5 days into a 3-day conference, they at 5 o'clock at night, just after these 1,000 people had been given a coupon for $150 to go eat and drink in Dallas, they said, oh, but before you go, let me introduce you to Gregory. Gregory's going to take you through a painting experience. And, can you imagine you've been in a conference for 1.5, 2 days now, and you got this guy on stage who's I'm going to do what for who? I'm just thinking about the guys and girls in the audience. But anyway, they said, okay, so I get on stage and for 10 minutes, I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. Go. And so these 1,000 people were broken into 3 ballrooms, 330 in each ballroom, and they were around tables, and there was a canvas on the table, and I told them what to do, how to do it. Let's just watch the video, and I'll come back to it let's just watch that video.
This has been an incredible journey with Equinix, and I don't think there are many companies bringing art or this kind of activity into the workplace. It's taken a lot of coordination and a lot of effort and a lot of people's parts. So the theme is connecting to the power of one. So we've used the corporate values for people really to kind of take them on and try to internalize them and then paint them. I think it gives them a chance to really understand on a different level, a deeper level, what those values are and what Equinix really stands for. To meet new people and make new connections. I really believe connections are how and why we become better people. Arts and nature, these things help us to regenerate. When people go back to work, they take a little bit of what they've learned or experienced in these workshops back with them. They just seem like they've had a great time and they've done it with their colleagues. It's unified. It's unified. I haven't known many of these people that long, but I really feel like I'm part of a family.
So that was such a home run. That's 8 foot high by 48 foot wide mural that was made of 96 pixels, as you can see. And those, as I say, these are people who didn't wake up in the morning thinking they were going to be part of a mural, a gigantic mural, which ended up on the corporate headquarters wall in the headquarters in Redwood City. So, amazing experience, flying by the seat of our pants. Didn't know if it would work, had no idea if it would work. We'd done it for dozens of people, but never 1,000 people. And it was just an amazing experience and that was to me realizing, wow, I love making art, but I love making art with other people and watching them. Again, these are executives. These are not artists, and you saw them become little kids again, like they just kicked their first field goal or scored their first touchdown, or did their first pirouette or whatever. It was amazing to watch grown adults and people who should know better than to have a great time making art. It was just a wonderful experience, and we've done that all over the world and continue to do so. So yeah.
So I'm going to use that to give an unashamed plug to ANCAN's art program, because we do the same thing, but we do it for people who are living with chronic diseases and care partners, and we do it once a month. We do it with Hannah, who herself lives with MS at a very young age and is an art teacher. That's what she trained to do. And we'd love, Greg, for you to show up to one of our arts nights. It's a Thursday night, but the problem is it clashes with our Men Speaking Freely, which is another one of our programs. We'll talk a little bit right before the end. We'll talk a little bit about our programs. I'm sort of interested to hear how Greg has experienced ANCAN. But when did you learn that you could motivate other people? Because that's such a hard thing to accept, I mean, you're doing it, but people say, well, you motivated me. How did you come to terms with that?
To answer your first question, when did I learn that? I was 15 years old living in Holland, and my dad came home one night and he said, the Spanish ambassador thinks you're amazing. And as a 15-year-old, what does that mean? What do you mean I'm amazing? I don't even know the Spanish ambassador. How does he know? Why does he think I'm amazing? So that was like the first inkling that people observe me and are taking something away from me that I have no idea what that is. Your people are looking at me and are learning something or seeing something or whatever. And I'm like, it's nothing that I'm doing consciously, but people are doing it. So eventually, when people ask me to speak in front of schools or companies or whatever, people have come up to me after and said, that really helped. And so again, I can only try to be authentic and tell stories. And that's about, the extent of it. And we all live with challenges, and it's just, I think sharing them and realizing we're not alone, and realizing people have it better and worse off than we do is part of it. And yeah, so that's other than that, I don't try to overthink it too much.
And there's a question in the chat, which I'm going to tie into what I'm thinking about who motivates you. And the question in the chat is, what role does Angie play in your journey? Yeah,
well, Angie's as she would say, the chief cook and bottle washer. She's the support behind the face in a way. She's quieter than I am. I'm more outspoken, but she's the little engine that could. She's the one who's continues to push forward. And there's been several times when I thought the lights had gone out, and she said, no, they haven't. And this is what we're going to do, and this is how to. And so she's been that motivator, that little energizer bunny behind it, saying, stop feeling sorry for yourself, or just quit. Anyway, I'm getting a little teared up. But she's that.
Yes. And how long have you been together?
We met in 1996, so you can do the math.
Wow.
Yeah. 30 years.
In what country?
In Singapore.
Okay.
She was on the beach, and she was in a bikini and carrying her windsurfer on her head. And I said, "Where did you get those cheeks?" No, I didn't say cheeks. Where'd you get those dimples? I'm sorry. And I didn't mean the dimples on her face. Anyway.
Yes, we know. We know. By the way, you wrote a book in Chinese. How did you learn Chinese, or was it translated?
No, I did learn Chinese, but it was translated. I wrote it in English and it was translated. And this is long before ChatGPT, but yeah, it was translated.
And do you speak Chinese? That's another. How many languages do you speak, Greg?
Chinese and French, and my English is okay.
Okay, no Dutch. You didn't, no,
Kleine
because they
beetje.
also,
Mag ik je helpen? Ik betaal friet met mayonaise, alstublieft. My first job as 15 was in at McDonald's in Voorburg in Holland, and that said, I'd like some French fries with mayonnaise, please. So yeah, I can speak some Dutch, but not a lot. Yeah.
um, we got one more video to watch, and we left it to the end because I feel like this video gets all of Greg and gathers him all up together in many ways. And so I'd like to roll it now because then it'll give us a few minutes to finish up at the end, and I don't want to cramp the video, and I also want to have enough time to ask you a couple of questions. So Quinn, let's sort of summarize much of what we've heard with this final video, which, by the way, Greg uses on the bottom of his email.
Art exhibit is underway in London. Now, if you've passed through the Cumberland Hotel in central London recently, you probably noticed a large mural being created by the artist Gregory Burns. Well, he spent time viewing London as a tourist to gain inspiration for that painting. Burns is an internationally acclaimed artist who's travelled the world painting scenes from air, land and sea. Well, CNN producer Victoria Kennedy met up with Burns at his studio in Singapore and has the story of his painted journey.
The beat of the music, inviting. The high-pitched whistle, intriguing. This is Gregory Burns, an artist with a painted journey. Contracting polio as a small child while living with his family in Israel, his paint-stained crutches and the faint clank of his metal leg braces add to the ambiance of his studio. I'm lucky. I'm witnessing him in his studio, where the sights, smells, and dreams burned into his mind from decades of traveling the world come to life on canvas.
This is where it gets ugly, where it gets dirty, and it gets, I dance, I cry, I laugh, I ask why. It's a lot of reflection and soul searching and trying to take something, whatever that is, I don't even know what it is, to the next level. And that's not easy, It's like trying to take something that you don't even know where that is and trying to get there.
The music helps, not so much to drown out, but rather to pull out the movement of his body, which flows through each bristle of his brush. This is what it's like being completely submerged in an artist's world, his mind, his happiness, as he attacks the canvas with carefully chosen colors, colors developed and deepened upon dried layers of pigment that have gone before them.
There's no roadmap. There's no, and that's like with all art and anything good. If you want to create something new, you've got to create it through by just going not to the same place you've already been.
And one place in particular where most artists have never been?
Pencils work underwater too, and I go underwater and I usually sit in the lotus position and I weight myself with some extra weight so I don't float away, and I just sit at the bottom of the ocean and I see the manta rays or the sharks or the coral or whatever, and I just sketch it, and it's very immediate and it's very meditative because underwater when you're breathing with a scuba tank and scuba gear, you hear your breath, you're very conscious of your breath, and you're also very conscious of your environment. I've been there and I've had manta rays, the size of a small minibus, fly over my head, and I've been passed by a 9-meter whale shark, and I've clung to rocks in these with the current whipping by, and with 24 black reef-tipped sharks, swimming around me, and it's really exciting and it's very immediate.
With a rope and a hook, Burns tethers himself to the reef so the swirling current doesn't drag him out to sea. And there, he floats, sketching the underwater world. On dry land, away from the salt and the sand, and back in the place where the music thumps, the painted journey is just beginning.
I do have themes in my life that have motivated me to do things, and maybe, an underlining one is perhaps perseverance. Okay, perseverance, and one step at a time.
Victoria Kennedy, CNN, Singapore.
On the life of an extraordinary man. Now, Burns' mural in London is now nearly complete, and there'll be a public exhibition next Wednesday. The mural will then hang in the Cumberland Hotel until the end of August, if you want to see it. And if you want any more information about Gregory Burns and his art, just go to our website, cnn.com.
So I have to tell you that I have a connection with that, because the Cumberland Hotel was where my parents used to take us for Christmas dinner every year when we were little kids. It's within, for those of you who don't know, it's within a stone's throw of Marble Arch.
Right across the street. Yeah.
Right across the street.
And
And I know it very, very well. Right next door, actually, to the big synagogue there. There's a big synagogue right next door, huge synagogue. And so I know the Cumberland really well. And I think, and my association with the Cumberland is one, the carvery, where they used to wheel around those pieces of meat and you could have as much as you want. And the other was Father Christmas and coming home with a present. Now, I'm keeping an eye on the clock here, but I would just like to say, oh, and I should also say to everybody, we do apologize for the sound, but it will be corrected post-production, and this whole video will be available again, and so you'll be able to watch it. We'll make sure that the links are well published by the March and by ANCAN. You came to ANCAN, I think, through Neil, correct?
Yeah.
Through our friend Neil, who we already helped, and he suggested you might come to us. I'm interested to know what you got out of ANCAN. It certainly wasn't this interview.
No. Well, yeah, I had lunch with Neil today, in fact. So when I learned about my diagnosis, as with any shock, my hair was on fire. As you can see, it's all gone now. But in all literal sense, I was scared to death. I didn't know what was going to go. Didn't know where to find information, and there really wasn't much around that I could find readily. And Neil introduced me to you and ANCAN, and so I started listening to these active surveillance talks every couple of weeks. And through those talks, really, I got an education, and I learned so much. And it's a steep learning curve for any kind of medical disaster that you want to talk about. And but those and I listened. I was in for 2.5 years. I was in on these talks, and I can't say enough about that. The guys and you're not doctors. We're not giving prognosis, but the information, like this worked for me, or this didn't work, or this is that. Look at that. Think of that. What about that? What does this number mean? What does that number mean? All that stuff is just grist for the mill. But most importantly, I mean, in my situation was I was able to. And that's what active surveillance is you actively surveil, and you wait and you watch. And then I kicked the can down the road for 2.5 years, and then finally did something about it. But I would never have known what to do, because the original treatment that I would have gotten, had I gotten treatment 2.5 years ago, was nothing compared to the treatment I just got a couple of months ago. And so it really was a learning, but also the technology and stuff had changed over time and given me that time to kind of figure out things. And also, okay, let's go in that direction. So it really was a very healing, a very not always happy time, but it was a great knowledge base and experiential. And a lot of guys who have a great hearts and really just want to help people find out the good stuff, and to find out how to help yourself, and which we all have to do, how to advocate and how to ask the right questions and things. So I can't say enough and thank enough to the group guys there, and that's why I keep coming back now. So now it's like, okay, now what can I help to some question, can I share something I learned along the way, can it help someone else? So it's like pay it forward now. So Yeah, so that I had I'm very grateful.
So we were kind of your motivational speaker for for wrestling with
Exactly.
your diagnosis.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but Rick, I wouldn't call you the motivate. I'd call you the kick in the pants guy. I don't know about motivational speaker, but yeah, just get on with it. Yeah, okay. But I say that
So
with respect. Yeah.
we've come to the end of our time. As we always say, what we do at ANCAN is priceless. You can't buy what we give away. And we do it for a lot of different conditions, not just prostate cancer. And we hope that whoever listens to this will look at what we offer, and we hope we can help you. We want to thank the Marsh for giving us this platform. We want to encourage you to put something in the tip jar for the Marsh, and you can put something in the tip jar for us as well if you like. Thank you so much.